conference with labor negotiator, CSCA, information was shared. B, conference with labor negotiators, SMEA, information was shared. And with that, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Hollingheads, can you lead, please?
Unmute myself. All right. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball. Play ball. Item B, calendar. Oops. Yeah. Item B, calendar of up and coming events. In the activities, March 9th, 2022, regular board meeting, post-map hearing number 2. March 23rd, regular board meeting. Item 4, public comment period, open session. Oh, roll call, excuse me.
Mrs. Cordero?
Yes, I am present.
Mr. Holmstead?
Present.
Mr. Valencia?
Present.
Mrs. Flores?
Here.
Mr. Lara?
Here. Proceed, item 4, public comment period, open session. The public comments are intended for members of the public to address the Board of Education on items involving the school district. Such testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each or 450 words per person, subject, and 15 minutes total each topic. If an answer to a specific question is requested, the board president will, if appropriate, direct administration to respond in writing. Mr. Beecher, do we have any public comments?
We don't have any public comments, but we do have several contributions for our public hearing later related to the post-map public hearing number 1.
You're muted, I think. Okay.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
Mr. Hollingshead approves agenda as presented. Ms. Flores seconds. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Item 6, consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Ms. Cordero moves. Mr. Valencia seconds. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia? Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Action item A, approve ACES early release revision. Ms. Grock, good evening.
Evening. So this is a housekeeping matter more than anything. When we built our ACES programs, we built them on the policy committee of the expanded learning division's guidance on what time students could go home. And at the time, they told us that students needed to participate in the full day of the program and could not sign out more than 15 minutes before the end of the program. So we currently have a policy in place that allows sign-ups or sign-outs at 5:45. That guidance has been revised to be more flexible for parent needs. And so we are asking the board to approve the revised ACES early release revision as presented.
Questions, anybody?
I'll move to approve the cases early release revision as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Hollingshead moves. Mr. Valencia seconds.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye, motion passes. Item B, Resolution 2118, preliminary resolution reduction or elimination of a particular kinds of service performed by certificated employees. Ms. Beltran, good evening.
Good evening, President Lara, Board of Trustees, Interim Superintendent Matt Beecher, members of our board meeting tonight and community. We bring forward to you resolution number 2118, which initiates the process for elimination of particular kinds of service performed by certificated employees. This is for a total of 1.386 FTE, which is an elimination of a total of 3 positions. This resolution authorizes the district providing notice to impacted employees by the March 15th, 2022 deadline required in Ed Code. There's other factors as well. Do want you to know that we have already had communication with the association. We'll be working with them together in explaining impacts and effects to the 3 individuals represented by this PKS layoff. Are there any questions? Otherwise, it is recommended that the Board of Trustees adopt Resolution 2118 for the preliminary resolution reduction or elimination of particular kinds of services performed by certificated employees as presented.
I so move.
I'll
And
second. Oh, sorry, Linda.
Ms. Flores moves. Ms. Cordero and Holly.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Item 8A.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Post-MAP public hearing. Mr. Beecher. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. I do have several folks to contribute through the public hearing. Ms. Garcia is first. Mr. Ricky, is she ready to join us? Is she in the room?
Yep, she is. I'll bring her across.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Garcia.
Hello, can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, good evening.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I was hoping I would be able to make my comment after the presentation. So it's okay, I'll go best off what I can now since I haven't seen some of the other details. Some of the thoughts I had after looking at the maps that were posted is that Broadway really should be considered as a natural boundary. I believe all of the maps don't really consider like that as a boundary, meaning districts go across Broadway. I think a consequence of this is that neighborhoods that are pretty different end up being connected, especially considering the sorts of families that live in Northwest Santa Maria versus across Broadway, right? And this is something that we have talked about from the beginning, but we really think that Northwest Santa Maria is a community of interest, being that the majority of families living there are indigenous, working class, and immigrant families, a lot of them being farm workers, right? And so there's a few different factors there that mean they should stay together. So that's one of the things, right? The Broadway should be considered a boundary, and that not doing so can connect communities that shouldn't be necessarily represented together. And I would say the same goes for Main Street as well. I know it's a bit harder there because of population. There's like some need to potentially go over. But when neighborhoods north of Main Street are divided into 3 districts, it's really diluting the voice of the families that are living there. Right. And that's one of the main things about this process is that we're really trying to give voice to people so they're able to elect representatives of their choice. That's why, that's why the board has decided to move in this direction in terms of trustee elections. And so the population there is really heavily concentrated. It's super compact. And so to see that, split into 3 different districts really gives a sense that voice is being diluted, really should be kept as unified as possible. And I think some of the other comments are reflected in the map that we ended up submitting. So we really think the best way forward is keeping Northwest Santa Maria as unified as possible. In our map, we ended up basically only splitting them into 2 districts because it's not possible to keep that whole area together. And so in doing that, really honoring that community. And we would really like to see a map also selected that creates 4 Latino CVAP districts, right? Making sure that there's not only majority Latinos, but majority Latino voters, so that they actually have voting power to elect representatives of their choice. So I think those are most of my comments. I am really, I'm looking forward to seeing the presentation and you know, breaking down some of the numbers, especially because the maps that are posted are, it's hard to see some of those main streets, right? Like just looking at the little lines, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where the map is divided. Yeah, thank you so much for letting me make my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. I cannot keep track of when I'm muted and when I'm not muted. So excuse me. But what I did say is thank you, Ms. Garcia, for participating in the process. We do have the map that was submitted by Ms. Garcia and cause as part of our consideration tonight. What I wanted to add is that we do have 6 written comments. We had discontinued taking written comments as part of public comment when we brought in live streamed comments for folks to participate in, so that we can see and have them participate with us live. But in the interest of broadening participation opportunities in this public hearing, we did open the window to allow for written public comments. So that's what I have for you tonight. The first is from Christian Alonso. Good evening, my name is Christian Alonso. I'm writing on behalf of Planned Parenthood, Central Coast Action Fund. Education is a critical mission of Planned Parenthood. We are proud of our bilingual community health educators that provide medically accurate, inclusive sex and healthy relationship education and information to adults, teens, and families throughout Santa Maria to help them make healthy decisions necessary to building a strong future. PPCCAF is here in support of the cause map because it honors Northwest Santa Maria, Northwest NWSM as a community of interest by only splitting the area into 2 districts. A majority of families in the Northwest are Indigenous working class and immigrant families who face particular barriers to participating in the school system. Other draft maps that split Northwest Santa Maria into 3 districts risk diluting the voting power of vulnerable students, parents, and families. Northwest Santa Maria is highly concentrated with farm working families, and their voice should be kept together and protected as much as possible. Finally, the cause map delivers 4 Latino CVAP majority districts to give Latino families the proportionate voting power they need to elect representatives that represent their communities. The current election system does not allow for the undocumented families in our community to vote, even though they are a significant part of the population. Fair CVAP districts can help deliver more representation to all families that live, work, and go to school in the district. Planned Parenthood Central Coast Action Fund is committed to creating healthier communities through education, and we are grateful for all your work to ensure the Bonita School District represents those in the community. Thank you for your time this evening, and please consider these suggestions for deciding communities of interest. The next comment comes from Kathleen Sharam, to whom it may concern. This letter is to voice my support for the cause map and its reflection of Northwest Santa Maria as a community of interest. The map limits its divisions into 2 districts, making it simpler for families, many of whom are Indigenous working class or other immigrants who already find participation in the school system difficult. Additionally, limiting the Northwest into 2 districts will provide those living in this area heavily concentrated with farm working families with a unified voice, something that redistricting was created to achieve. The cause map also creates 4 Latino CVAP majority districts, allowing for more equitable representation. The other maps result in diluting the Latino farm worker vote. Please select the cause map, support fair and equitable representation. Thank you. Sincerely, Kathy Shara. The next comment I have is from Angel Lopez. Dear school board members, my name is Angel Lopez. I am a youth organizer with Future Leaders of America, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that works with young high school students, predominantly products of the SMBSD and their families. Today, I'm writing to you, urging you to take into consideration the northwest side of Santa Maria as a community of interest and keep from splitting these communities into other districts. I would also like to express my support for the proposed cause map. This map honors Northwest Santa Maria as a community of interest by only splitting it into 2 districts. It is important to note that the majority of families in the Northwest are Indigenous, working class, and immigrant families who face particular barriers in participating in the school system. The maps, the other draft maps that split Northwest Santa Maria into 3 districts are diluting the voting power of already vulnerable communities. Thank you for your time, Angel Lopez. The next comment I have is from Zulema Ailman. Good morning. Below is my public comment for today's post-map public hearing at 6 p.m. To the SMBSD Board of Trustees, thank you for holding this space to hear from the community of the districting process. I'm writing you today to express my support for the cause map as a community member in Santa Maria and a community organizer that has worked with farm working and immigrant families in Santa Maria since 2018. I know the cause map is the best choice to ensure that representation for communities of interest is achieved. Residents of Northwest Santa Maria need a district process that maintains their voice loud and clear in order for the school district to best serve their children. As you know, this part of our community is made up of Indigenous, working class, farm worker, and immigrant families who face similar and unique barriers in participating in the school system. Though it is challenging to keep a community of this density together, the cause map minimizes the separation to just 2 districts, ensuring that the community can elect 2 community representatives that best represent them. The other draft maps not only separate them into 3 districts, but 2 of the maps join them with affluent communities across North Broadway, effectively diluting their voting power and voice. I've had the opportunity to do programming on the school system with parents from this area and have personally seen the gap between immigrant parents and educators in the education system. This has led to their children falling behind, which hurts their families as well as our community. Parents are eager to be a part of their child's education, but they are not always provided the best opportunities. I truly believe the cause map is one of the steps forward to ensuring the opportunity is there for the needs of those families to be met. Thank you, Zulema Elman. The next comment I have is from David Dennis. To whom it may concern, I support the cause map. It honors Northwest Santa Maria as a community of interest by only splitting the area into 2 districts. This matters since many families in the Northwest are Indigenous, working class, and immigrant families who face particular barriers in participating in the school system. The Northwest is highly concentrated with farm working families. Their voice should be unified and protected as much as possible. Other draft maps that split the Northwest into 3 districts dilute the voting power of these vulnerable communities. This cause map creates Latino CVAP majority districts to give Latino families the voting power they need to elect representatives of their choice without diluting Northwest Santa Maria into 3 districts as other maps do. I urge the selection of the cause map and give the Northwest communities the unified voice they deserve. Signed, David Dennis. My final public comment tonight comes from Daniel Segura. Hello, my name is Daniel Segura. I'm writing today to express my support for the proposed cause map for SMBSD. With 2 siblings currently enrolled in the district, an alumni of the district myself and a lifelong member of our community, I believe this map best represents our diverse population of students and their families. Northwestern Santa Maria is an area of our city I call home, and one that has a high concentration of working class families. I believe that this area should remain intact in order to allow a strong allow a strong opportunity for our Latino and Indigenous families' voices to be heard. The cause map takes our interests into account in both short-term and long-term outlooks. I strongly urge you to vote in favor of consideration of this map. Thank you. Best. So that concludes our comments and our participation in the public hearing. And then we also have David Lopez to present to you his slides with the maps and his comments on those maps. And then also Todd Robbins from AALRR is available for any questions you might have about the particulars around the California Voting Rights Act and how these 4 options align with those requirements. Mr. Lopez.
Good evening, members of the board and staff and those of us joining us tonight. Thank you for having me back again. We're here for the beginning of what's called the map scenario review process. All of these will have public hearings, and then we're going to show some initial maps, including the map that cause submitted that we called scenario 4, public submission by cause. I want to share my screen here and we can go through this. And some of this we covered before, so can you all see this? You all see the screen? Okay.
Yes.
So we're here at the first of the public hearings and the scenarios to be discussed. There'll be a follow-up meeting on the 9th, and maps have to be posted on the 2nd in order to be compliant so that you can have a public hearing and consider them, because you might be in a position to vote on it, but if not, we have, if necessary, an opening here for a 3rd public hearing and a board meeting to cover the map scenarios if necessary. Again, the intention is in April to go to the county committee and have a public hearing and cover this with them, and then we would proceed to let the register of voters and other county folks know, and then the first elections with these new areas would be held in November of 2022. The considerations that go into the trustee area maps are as follows. As I said, the most important are always going to be, they must be balanced by population. So every area should be, to the extent possible, within the same numbers. You can't have a variance of more than 10% from the smallest to largest. And then we want to make sure they're compliant with the Federal Voting Rights Act. This is the part of the maps and the data where I refer to the CVAP data, the citizen voting age population, because that will give you your best estimate of the different ethnic groups that those numbers, to make sure that, you know, if you can have a majority area and you're trying to dilute it by some factor, then you don't want to do that. You want to be compliant with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And then, of course, it must be compact and contiguous as much as possible. Where identified, respect communities of interest as much as possible, follow human-made geographical features, if possible, respect incumbency, and then any other local considerations, such as we want X amount of school sites, we would like X amount of attendance boundaries, or anything that's germane and relevant to your community and the board. That said, just to go over some specifics again about how folks in your district responded to the 2020 census. This is literally the categories and the counts of total population for the folks that responded to the census, and that may be mail-in ballots, that may be knocking door to door, or what have you, but this is the total of the people in the Santa Maria Bonita School District, almost 109,000 people. And then as a side note here, kind of an informative piece, how many of those were over age 18? So this doesn't become a factor. It's just provided there because obviously if you have a household and they have 2 children that are under 18, they're going to be counted by the census. Same as senior communities. And we get asked a lot, you know, who was left out, who was counted. Everybody that responded to the census, whether it's a door knocking survey or whether it's a mail-in or online, this is the layout of your district and how respondents addressed all these questions and how they categorize themselves population-wise.
So, Mr. Lopez, can
Yeah.
you make that bigger? Because we have really tiny laptops here. I mean, can you take all the stuff on the top of your screen out of there?
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry.
it
So I
full
think I
screen.
can do fit to window. Is it slideshow?
Yeah, we don't want. Yeah, it's not his vacation, Vita.
All
not
right, I
that
think
kind of
it might be this one here. Okay, now I just have to figure out how to move it.
How to make it bigger?
Yeah, I'm on a dual screen. This is the problem.
I mean, am I the only one? It's really tiny to me.
That's why I bring this thing on the table.
Let me try this here.
I mean, you got the sidebar, the above.
David, while you're on that screen.
Under view options, I changed the percentage of my screen, so I made it bigger.
David, while you're on that screen, would it be possible to recap the contiguous component of that screen that you were just on right now?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, we can't see the screen right now. It's not.
Okay. So let me get it off slideshow. So you can't see that here. Let me do this here. Get it back. Okay. So can you see this?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. This is the smaller one. Unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out how to get the larger one here, but I think if I do, I can zoom to this here. Short term, I think I should be able to go higher than this. Yeah.
John, did you go to the top to options on yours? I'm full screen. Options doesn't do anything for me except full screen or original size. Okay. I can get it up there too, folks.
I know. I know slideshow has been something that we use in the past, but if you're sharing a screen, if you can, let's see, presentation view here. Let me try one more thing here before we if I can get rid of my dual screen, I should be okay. Well, does anyone have any tips here? Because I'm at a loss how to make it larger here.
Actually, on our screens, up at the very top, right at the end of you are viewing David Lopez's screen. It says options on our computers, board members and viewers. And if you click on that, it says original size or full screen. Click full screen. It makes it
a little bigger.
It's big enough. I mean, it's a lot. I'm okay with that.
When I get to the actual map scenarios, I can throw the 11x7 PDF copies and you can see them in greater detail and we can focus on them.
Okay.
Hopefully you guys can see the
work
presentation
for
at least. But I do know that these kind of slides are difficult to see if you want them enlarged. I literally have to do that, to make that happen. But
which isn't centered on my screen.
Let's see here. Okay. So is this okay for now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is how the folks responded to your census, and then this is a heat map here, again of your largest concentration of your largest minority group is Hispanic Latino, and as you can see, they're dispersed all over the district. Generally speaking, as I said, these are census blocks, so the larger they are, generally, the smaller the amount of people. You get really dense in here on both sides of Broadway from the 101 over. And so quite honestly, as we go through the scenarios, 2 of the scenarios we presented have the same thing as the cause map in that there's 4 majority Hispanic Latino and there's 1 plurality each, which means it accomplishes what the cause map does, but I'll get to address the issue of Northwest Santa Maria because I am a little confused at the 2 trustee areas that were created versus what we created, so we can cover that as we get there. But this is again the CVAP information. citizen voting age population based on the census responses. And as you can see, there's less people than the actual population. So why population is used to determine the size of the trustee areas and balancing them, this citizen voting age population is used to ensure there's no dilution or cracking and packing of any protected classes. So that said, and this is where I can go to the, if you'd like me to go over each scenario in a larger map, I can do that. So let's start with that here and just cover these one by one. And these I can zoom to any quality you want. So this is our first scenario. This has 4 majority Hispanic Latino areas and 1 that isn't a plurality, and that is this area here, trustee area 5. And I apologize in some of these maps because we first did it this way or where we had to reconstruct the cause map. The colors are correct. The colors here match each trustee area, but it doesn't follow the same pattern where this is going to be yellow in the next scenario and this is going to be green and so on. So if you're looking at what area it is, just refer to the legend down here. So in this first scenario, we drew it like this. And quite honestly, something that was unique for your district that the school district bent over backwards to provide was some data regarding Mixteco languages, because that was the first, mention that we want to make sure we respect indigenous languages and people who associate themselves. And that may be Alto, Bajo, Mixteco. You can have Zapoteco. There's a couple of different ways people choose to categorize themselves. And I'm not going to wax poetic and tell you I'm an expert, but I can tell you that we're able to look at student data. And in this whole area here, specifically on every map, there's 91 people that responded that they spoke that language at home. The rest of your district here, in fact, almost the entirety of the district, almost 12,000 respondents spoke Spanish at home and 5,000 spoke English and a few assorted. So any way you cut it here, you're going to have several Hispanic, Latino majority groups. And the question becomes, as was brought up by 6 public comments, Northwest Santa Maria. And I'm guessing Northwest Santa Maria is a cutoff at Taylor Street or Donovan. I know the area well. This is where Vallarta Market is down here. And the question I had, and this is the only scenario where we have 1, 2, 3 potential trustee areas that I guess in theory that would dilute it somehow, but these all achieve CVAP majorities. So it becomes a question of geographically, do they work? Do you like the number of school sites? Are they in fact respecting communities, or are they too broad? And so this was our first stab at it, just to give you a look. You may like this, but say, yeah, we want you to modify it. Come back with another map that tightens this up or that, or we think this should move here. That's the point of this. And you don't have to do it today. I would say by the end of the week, if something comes to you after reviewing these, you can pass it along to staff and we can see if we can make modifications. But the way this particular one worked out was there's a 5.2% variance. This is the population variance in each of the trustee areas, and again, that's compared to the ideal population. And then the other important component here is down here. This is the citizen voting age population. And so in this situation, you have Hispanic Latino in 4 of the 5, and they're barely not a plurality here in trustee area 5. So there's 4 Hispanic Latino majority CVAPs and 1 area that's not, because of the way these were drawn up. So if you look, trustee area 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are majorities, and 5 out here isn't. But in other scenarios, it is. So we try to keep it compact and contiguous, keep neighborhoods together. I know from experience, maybe your opinion is different, but it used to be in the old days, Broadway and Main Street was a perfect cross to the district, but population demographics have changed so much that oftentimes it's from here to here that people have common interests, languages, neighborhoods, what have you. So I'll let you decide and your community decide that, but this was just scenario 1 that we wanted to show you here. And if there's no questions from the board on this particular one, we'll move to scenario 2. Okay, So let's shrink this down, and I apologize. Sometimes if I open too many of these up, the screen crashes and I have to try it again.
Mr. Lopez, would you
Yes.
just clarify for everybody who's watching the significance of the variance?
Sure, that's a great question. So the variance is an interesting component. It is you just have to be under 10%. So sometimes you get some wonderful scenarios where they're 1% or less, and you say great. But really, if you were grading papers, that scenario would get an A plus all the way from 1 to 6, and from 6 to 10, they would get a A. So it's as long as it's under the 10% variance, you're fine. They all work. It just becomes a matter of, are we balancing it by population to the satisfaction, which would show up in the variance? And then equally important is, are we respecting citizen voting age population? Are we diluting anybody's vote or putting them all in an area so they only have one vote? That's called packing. And cracking is when you spread them out to the winds, and now instead of having 3 strong votes, they have none. So we don't do that. We respect CVAP, we respect population. But back to your comment on the, and thank you for bringing that up, the variance here, they're all good. They all meet the requirements up to 9.99%. So whatever one that the board and committee likes, it would be fine if it meets that requirement. Now, looking at the second scenario, this was done to balance population, and this particular scenario creates 4 majority Hispanic, Latino CVAP areas and 1 plurality. That plurality is in trustee area 5. So you have trustee area 1, and you have trustee area 2, 3, 4 down here. They all achieve majorities, and this is a plurality. And this is what I was mentioning. This is Northwest Santa Maria. That's two trustee areas there. So I'm not clear what the intention was from the comments we got, but I know there was a comment like, can we keep it Broadway? As I said, either way you go around here past Broadway, you're going to have a strong Hispanic Latino representation. It just becomes a question of, does that meet your and the community's standards as it comes to school sites, as it comes to neighborhoods? And you see these are very clean lines. We don't do a lot of plug and play and grab stuff over here to make it work. So in this situation, it also respects incumbency. Each incumbent has their own area, and the demographics of this particular one shake out as follows. And that is that it's a 6.7% variance overall, population-wise. And then, as I was mentioning, the CVAP estimates here are that you have a strong Hispanic Latino presence in trustee area 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is where I say it's a plurality, because it's more than the next group, but it's not quite 50.1%. And so this achieves everything that the folks making comments wanted to see. Again, I'd have to defer to them on what they're referring to specifically when it comes to Northwest Santa Maria, because this also has only 2 areas. But that said, I can move on to the other maps if you're okay with that, or does anyone have any questions on this particular map? And we can come back to them too. I'm not suggesting this is the only chance to ask questions. So, okay. So scenario 3 also achieves 4 Hispanic Latino majorities in that it's got a shape up here. There we go. In that you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. It also has an incumbent in each area. And again, you have Northwest Santa Maria only has 2 trustee areas that it's comprising. Again, when we looked at self-responding student data, and I just gave you a general view because that's a lot of that's confidential information. I wouldn't want to say here's where they all live. You can't do that, but you can see that across both sides of Broadway here, is where the 91 people resided. So I understand the community. I understand there's a lot of farm workers, and there's a lot of farm workers in all areas of Santa Maria. Sometimes they're concentrated more than others, but I think this 2 trustee areas dividing North Santa Maria works as well. But I'll leave that to you. And again, everything was done here nice and compact and contiguous, and it was to balance population. There's different ways you can do stuff. You can say, well, let's keep this area on this side of Broadway, but then you'd have to make it up and push some of this up. You'd have to subtract some of this to make it all balance. So this was and again, this is a first attempt. We have another meeting, possibly a third meeting if needed, to iron out any details or nuances. One of the other considerations we did, and we can come back with attendance boundaries for your elementary schools if you'd like to see that. We tried to balance it in a way where everybody had at least 2 or 3 school sites within their boundaries, understanding that communities, neighborhoods near the school site feed into the school site. So that was a consideration once we achieved the population balance and once we achieved the CVAP balance. And I'm going to show you that right now. This is a 1.8% variance, so it's the least of all of them. But again, a 9.99% map would still get an A. But it achieves that. And sometimes people like that when they're, especially trustees or members of the community, because the population doesn't vary that much. But again, if you had 9.9% variance, it's still within the bounds and legally acceptable pursuant to the CVRA. The citizen voting age population estimates, you have these. They're all majority areas and trustee area 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you have a plurality here in 5 because it's the greatest one of all of these. So that also achieves 4 CVAP, Latino, Hispanic majorities, and 1 plurality. So 2 of our maps do that, and they also respect Northwest Santa Maria and that there's only 2 trustee areas. And so then we're going to turn to, unless there's any questions about this, we're going to turn to the cause map that was submitted. So we can come back to this here. I'll leave this open. Okay, so this is the cause map that was drawn. I'm guessing Northwest Santa Maria is here, is okay also here, or I don't know if there was meant to be only 2 areas or if they were calling this 2 areas. But again, as I said, 2 of our maps do that. They did use Broadway as a defining line here, but this works. This is legally acceptable pursuant to the CVRA. We wouldn't have necessarily submitted it this way, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just going to point out some things that we didn't do in our maps. Sometimes when we're doing maps for some districts, we have to do this large area here and put it in one trustee area, or we have to do this and attach it over here, because that's the way the district shapes up, or you know, the way the population flows. We didn't do this in yours on our own because I'm not sure that to be honest, I'm not sure where the neighborhoods south of Marion Medical Center and Allen Hancock and the car dealerships and all of that, you know, if they should be grouped over here with the neighborhood near Ariana. So, and the airport. So that's why we didn't draw it as a scenario. But as I said, it achieves the same thing we did in that all 4 of these areas are Hispanic, Latino, CVAP majorities, and this is a plurality. I also, you know, this is a large area to put into this. In all of our scenarios, we only dipped a little bit above below Stoll Road to include it. So I'm not sure how you feel about it. Again, there's nothing legally wrong with this. It's just not what we would have proposed, mainly because of this area and this area. It's not gerrymandered. It's nothing like that. It just doesn't seem, in my opinion, as compact and contiguous as some of the others. And I think there was a lot of effort here to dip down and grab this trustee and put them in part of this. And I grew up right here, so I know this neighborhood feeds into tunnel just like this area does. So again, we've done stuff like this before when we had to because of the lay of the land or the population. but we wouldn't have submitted it in your case, but it is here because it meets the requirements. You may like it. You may find that this is the best one or any modifications to this or others. And it also achieves what two of our maps do in that there's a population variance. It's 9.2, but again, anything under 9.99 is fine. And then the CVAP works in that you have 4 trustee areas that have a majority Latino Hispanic. It's flip-flop here for 4 and 5. And that's because what we called 5 is 4 in their scenario. And if you go back to the map, this is trustee area number 5, and this is trustee area 4. So again, that's my 2 cents. I may be, not in line with the board's thinking or what the community thinks, but again, I'm open to all questions or suggestions, or why'd you do this, or what do you think about this, or how many school sites is in each, or can you modify that? And we can take it like that. If there's no questions on any particular map, I can just pull them up as we have questions.
David, can we go back down to the cause CVAP data?
Sure.
Numbers. That's a little quick for me.
So trustee area 1, and let me help you if you have the map in front of you too. Trustee area 1 is the yellow area on the map. It was pretty much, it goes down Broadway to Blosser. And so that has the highest concentration. Trustee area 2 is the one that's on the east side of Broadway, and it extends all the way out past Main Street, and it dips down there, and it encompasses Alvin and Tunnel and Elementary and Rice Elementary. Trustee area 3 is the red one that is in the north part of town that spills over on the east and west side of Broadway and comes down and grabs the trustee south of Donovan Road. And then trustee area 4 is the blue one, which goes from, Black Road down by Arianas all the way to Foxen Canyon and Betaravia out there. And that's the one that's a plurality. And then trustee area 5 is the purple one, which has the upper part of Broadway, and it goes all the way out to Bonita.
This is John Hollinshead speaking. So I feel like looking at the cause map as it compares to the other maps, and by judging by their comments, that especially the first young lady that spoke to us, I feel like their interpretation of Northwest is north of Main and west of Broadway, because that's the only way that there's 2 districts. They were saying that they had it created so that there were 2 districts in Northwest rather than 3, because yours went up to was Alvin was a natural, I think, boundary, wasn't it, on several of them?
Oh yeah, if you go all the way to Main Street, I mean, if that's Northwest Santa Maria, that's half of Santa Maria,
Yeah, well, that concept, when you look at that hot map, I think that's where the problem comes, is that the population concentration, and you were just showing their CVAP data there, and one of their, and I'm not trying to be critical of cause, I'm just trying to kind of collate it with with your professional presentation, is that the numbers really drop precipitously from 2 to 1, from area 2 to 1. There's a pretty, I mean, the percentage is large for the voting population, as stated there, but the number of folks is considerably less. So I think voting power is people, not just the percentage of made up by. So
absolutely.
We want to make sure that those CVAP numbers give power also.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
And refresh our memories, if you would. You said that the respondents to either the census or probably to your guys' surveys who spoke indigenous languages were how many folks?
Well, so we wanted to cover all bases, and the school district wanted to make sure that if there's, because if you speak certain languages, or you consider yourself a particular ethnic group, you're limited by the responses that the census has. And I've heard this from people who are of Persian or North African descent. They're like, well, I got to pick one because they don't have me. Or same thing if you speak an indigenous language, whether it be Native American or Central American indigenous or whatever you have to pick one. They don't have a category for every. And so typically from what I've seen in working with cause in other districts and encountering feedback like this, is it you have Mixteco that's Alto or Bajo, and you also have Zapoteco, and there's a few others, but we took the surveys that the students' families completed for the district to see if we're missing anything, if there's a community of interest, if there's a concentration, say from West Taylor to Main Street. And there was only 91 that responded to all of those various, what I typically know as Mixteco. And so there was on literally, if I could have dots, this entire area would be full of red dots, which meant Spanish speaking, and down here. And there was 11,170 that responded they speak Spanish at home as their main language. And that literally, if I could take a paintbrush, it would be like this. And there was 5,000, almost 5,700 that spoke English, and they're dotted all in here and a few scattered in here, but they're less of that. And then there was 4 that were other languages such as Arabic or Tagalog. So I understand the community of interest argument. I understand having people's voice. I'm pro that as well. I think that's a very noble pursuit. But it becomes a matter of geography and neighborhoods and how many school sites, the boundaries, or any other considerations you have, because not only in this map, but 2 that we provided, it achieves the same thing population-wise with Latino, Hispanic majorities and 1 plurality. But whereas I feel our maps have more compact and contiguous, areas, they may not be to your particular liking or the cause liking. They follow census blocks and they make sense. And theirs do too. But as I said, my only issue as a demographer is that I wouldn't necessarily group this community with the folks here all the way down to, the neighborhood behind Marion Medical Center to the mall. But that's me. And this is a big area too for one trustee, I think, to have, but I understand why they did it, because once they got these done, you kind of have to fill in the pieces. So it just becomes a question of what your district likes. I'm going to bring up the other maps too, just so you see. And then this was a scenario 2 map that we did. And again, the reason we went past Broadway, I knew it growing up as, where do you live in relation to Main Street and Broadway, right? And I knew growing up, there wasn't, Tommy Kuntz, I knew play with their kids, and now it fascinates me that I see high schools named after teachers I knew. And I think you're in the Sousa Educational Center. That was my 7th grade teacher. So things change, but I know that this part of town used to be, for lack of a better word, less gentrified. It was more white, and then this part of town was considered more Hispanic. Now this whole area is a mixture, but you can make 4 Hispanic Latino majorities pretty much any way you want to go. And the question becomes, what do we do here? Can we make it a plurality? And so we don't involve ourselves in racial gerrymandering, trying to make 5 majority Hispanic just for the sake of it, because you have to respect other interests of the community. There's other things that school districts like attendance boundaries where the kids feed into from neighborhoods, and other natural geographical features. And so in our scenario 2, I mean, it seems like we achieved that, but if the suggestion is from East Main Street all the way to, till you start heading to the Speedway, that's the community of interest. I get it, but I don't see how anybody's losing anything by selecting scenario 2 or 3 or 4, because they achieved the same thing. And that's just my 2 cents as a demographer. I leave it to you to see what works best. This is the cause map. You know, again, like I said, that's kind of weird to me, but it's legally compliant and it achieves what's trying to be achieved.
It looks like they use Blosser as their western boundary for the Northwest.
Yeah, they did do that, Blosser and Broadway, but you know, that only works until you get down here, and then it crosses all the way over here, and then it dips down to grab somebody here. So I get it, but then if this is also a community of interest, then that means these are 2 communities of interest, all the way up until like you walk across the street to Tunnel Elementary. So that was my only concern. It works. You know, I think ours achieves that and still respects neighborhoods and the amount of schools, but I leave this to you because you're the folks that live here and have to, you know, have students come and go and have people elect you. And does it represent your community? Is it the right size? Is it the right, you know, shapes? And that's what this discussion is for. And any modifications, like oftentimes what comes out of these meetings is, hey, we like this one, but can you stop the line here? And maybe extend it down here, and then we'll play with it and see if that works. And I will tell you, in these little areas here that you see, they're very dense. So sometimes if we drop down and just grab this, now that spikes this area up 1,000 people. And you have to make similar changes up here. Maybe get rid of this and add some to the green, get rid of this and so on. So we're willing to do whatever scenarios you want or whatever, you know, adjustments. You don't even need to rule out any scenarios here unless one just doesn't jive with you. Then we can focus on the ones that work or modifications. But I'm just curious to hear some feedback that you have or questions you have on any of these scenarios.
I'll go. This is Linda Cordero. As you have stated, David, all of the maps show 4 of the voting districts with a majority Hispanic vote. I think in the cause map, there's a greater variance of eligible voters across the 5 districts than in the other 3 that you presented. And to me, that is a little problematic, as well as in the trustee area 4, that it is a very large area, but it's like the extremes. And I understand, and of course we are complying with the need to go to voting districts, but if people really think that any single trustee who is voted in from their area is going to make decisions only based on the needs of the schools within that area, that becomes a problem for me, because having served on the board and being here still, I don't know that I would ever make a decision based on which school, my schools need this more than your schools need this, that kind of thing. Because what we're doing is really working toward common goals across the district. So even though there may be an equitable, if you would, number of schools within each trustee area, I don't, and you know, if it makes parents or people in that community feel more comfortable approaching just one trustee, that's totally fine. Great, but at this point, I welcome hearing from anybody in our school community. So I think looking at the variance, because, we'll establish these now, and while we aren't required to think about, what will happen in 10 years, I think we all need to kind of be thinking, okay, in 10 years, there are going to obviously be some shifts in population or added population that will need to be taken into consideration. But a variance of 9.2, which is still within the legal limit, when that goes over 10%, and we inevitably are going to have to make some adjustments in 10 years, when this comes back to us. But the lesser variance in density of population in each area, on top of the eligible voters within each area, seems to be a better criteria to be making a decision on. You're nodding your head, so I must not have stepped over the line.
No, very, very good comments. And I've seen situations where, obviously you're a school board, you represent the whole district. And I like to hear that from board members, because the last thing you want is, no, this is my territory, that's yours. And then you have just a convoluted mess of people. So I'm very happy you said that. One of the suggestions I had earlier too, because you're right, it's not all about school sites. Some boards say if we can all have 3 or 4, that'd be great, but it doesn't always work out that way. And that's just because, that's what different boards want. But another good indicator too is if you want to see actual elementary district boundaries, because you might have a trustee area that has 2 school sites and another has 5, and you think, well, those aren't balanced. And that was our strong criteria, but it's not balanced. And you'll find that boundaries shift all over the place. And most of the trustees will probably have 5 or 6 attendance boundaries overlapping their districts anyway. So that's often, something that we hear and ask for. But at this point, I think it's important to see if it makes sense for you as residents of the community and representation here. The school's sites are listed as an afterthought, just to see. We didn't put them on the map how many there were, but I mean, you can count them up and see who has how many ES in middle school. But I agree, there should be a lot of different criteria that goes into it. And I didn't even think about this for this meeting, because this often does come up. In some cases, the trustee areas that you create have, they have 22,000 people, and you're like, that's great, they're all balanced. But you'll see citizen voting age population estimates could be drastically different. And that is the American Community Survey's best estimate based on surveys, polls, what have you, of who is the citizen voting age. And that means, I'm over 18, I can vote, and for whatever reason, I'm eligible to vote versus those that aren't. But that isn't a good factor too. While this has to be done to balance each area, this has to be done to make sure there's no dilution of the vote, but sometimes it may seem skewed if you have, 10,000 plus and 5,000 in another. So that's something to consider too, if it hasn't crossed your mind.
David, a question that I have is, does that citizen voting age population variance between trustee area 1 and trustee area 5, because those seem to be the ones that are lower, does that have anything to do with because my understanding is the average Latino age is pretty young overall. I want to say maybe I'll just throw out a number, 25, let's just say, is the average age of your average citizen here in Santa Maria. So do those numbers have anything to do with that? So for example, in trustee area 1, which is the yellow one, the fact that we have younger Latinos living here, maybe between the ages in 25 to say 35, does that have anything to do with that? Where our younger folks are living?
It could. Oftentimes, you see different numbers across the state. sometimes you see, or what I've noticed, especially with large Hispanic populations, that they have a dense, they have a large population, but then the 18 and over reduces it smaller, and then the citizen voting age population is even smaller. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not citizens. Maybe they're just not interested or haven't been politically active. Maybe they didn't, they didn't take the census. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it could be age, it could be other factors. The interesting thing here, though, is trustee area 2 and 3, which have the same amount pretty much, have 4,000 and 5,000 more. And that's all, these are Hispanic Latino areas. So if there might be something tied to age, it might be just, their vote hasn't been heard in past elections or in estimates of that. So that's a good question. We never really know that, but yeah, I have seen that before. And it's not just Hispanic Latino. It happens in a lot of demographics. Depends where you are in the state.
And are these maps always drawn based on the population size? Because I see that the population size is very similar, right? 22,000, 21. Are they ever drawn based on the citizen voting age as opposed to the total population size?
No, the California Voting Rights Act requires population to be the determining factor. So we get this a lot, especially in really small districts like what's there? I'm working with San Simeon up north. They got like 400 or 500 people. And so in some of those districts, you go, hey, there's 100 people per trustee area, but I only got 30 people to vote, and that becomes a bigger factor. But it is what it is, and it doesn't matter how many, you have to use populations, you have to use retirees, kids, whoever took the census. And I tell people, it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrats, it doesn't matter if they're independent or military, it's based on population. And then the CVAP is the piece that we use to make sure only that we're not diluting a protected class, historic minority groups vote.
Yeah, because that's definitely, a resounding concern, right, of the community, is to make sure that our farm worker community, our low-income folks, our indigenous families, that their votes are not diluted. And so if the cause map is taking that into consideration, I think definitely we got to pay attention to that, right? Especially if we don't live in that neighborhood, right? We're not going to be as knowledgeable, right, of who lives in that neighborhood. And to my understanding, cause is very cognizant of that, right? Of where our families are living, especially our most overlooked populations. So I definitely think it's worthwhile to consider that map and to make sure that we're not overlooking anything inadvertently.
Any other questions or comments on any of the maps or the presentation?
So my consideration is that we definitely continue to look at it, because cause does a really good job of understanding, right, where our communities live, who are our most vulnerable populations, farm workers, indigenous families. And so just being cognizant of that, right? Paying attention to, like, why did they submit this? I'd be curious to hear from the cause representatives why this particular map they feel, right, is a map that we should be highly considering. Because I think the comments came before, right? I'd be interested in hearing now that you reviewed all the maps, kind of what their thoughts are, as well as other folks that, of course, that submitted public comment, because it seems like there's a lot of support for this particular map. So I'd be interested to learn why. For example, why is it like blue here? Why does it incorporate, if you will, the Arianas area as well as the Miller area? I'd be curious to find out more about why that is.
I agree, because that's a very disparate, two disparate communities and how they present. So yeah, I agree. But I think the other thing for me is that our district has probably a better capacity to reach out and identify and communicate and survey parents than anybody, because they've got those connections with the kids that are in our district. So I'm not disparaging cause, but I'm not saying, what I am saying is that I don't think they have any better capacity to read who's in our district than we do. Yeah. So I think that's a little making a little bit of an assumption that they're doing, that they have the capacity to do that to a greater degree. And I've worked with cause. I think, and I appreciate they brought this to us. For me, looking at this, I have trouble looking at their 4 and 5, when I see that that large area on the east side of Broadway linked to Arianas and Tanglewood, because I think that I know that David said that's a district as they delineated it out, that east side, that's a plurality. But I feel like the voices of the folks out in Arianas may be highly different than and more regionalized or what have you than the people who are on the other side of the freeway. So I'm with you, Ricardo. I would like to hear what causes rationality is for that one and that one in particular. And I would also like to hear what their interpretation of Northwest is, because I feel like the demographers have made a really strong case for trying to set up fair boundaries, and as Linda said, with the variance of 1.9%, say with the one example, that leaves room for growth over the course of the 10 years till the next census or what have you for the different districts, so that there's not a possibility of a dilution in the meantime of voice. So I think that might be a little bit problematic with the 9.2 that Cause presented, even though David said 9.2 is still an A.
Yeah.
So I just, I think you're right. I think we need to really kind of marinate on a lot of these things, but I would like to hear Cause's interpretation of Northwest. And then I think did you mention that area? I think it's their area 4, why that Arianas is coupled with the East Miller side, because I think that is an interesting kind of line. And I would be curious to see what the rationale is.
Well, and no matter what map,
Yeah.
in the, and I pointed at the map. Unmuted. Areas 1, 2, and 3 have the majority Hispanic voters. So in my opinion, and on this map also trustee area 5, 4 of the 5 trustee areas have a majority Hispanic vote. How is it that anyone's voice is not being heard? That would be my question.
There is a lot to look at here, and as we contemplate and we move and look at each of the pieces, I'm still staring at it, and I've been staring at it for a couple of days. Valid points, but also more conversation and clarity as we move forward. Good point on maybe getting a little more information from Gausa in their selection of division, just so we can hear some of those things too. But
well, and I don't want to be dismissive of Cause or dismissive of Ricardo's concerns about the indigenous smaller groups that may be not as well identified or responsive as we might hope. And that there is that's why I wanted to know about their comments about Northwest, because our you guys grew up here, I didn't, but I know what I've in the last 28 years of being here, what the interpretation maybe of Northwest, and I would like to make sure that we don't miss something slips under the radar.
and that's why I appreciate the clarity. Yeah, definitely.
Mr. Lara, or Mr. Beecher, or David, whoever, what's the next, where do we go?
Let me step in. David has his next steps, but I'll step in just from what I'm hearing. I'm going to go ahead and reach out to Ms. Garcia just to see if she can give me rationale, the building blocks of each of the areas, because I think a lot of times David kind of described that when you start with one area, it really sets the stage for all 5 areas. And when you modify just one area, it really causes a ripple effect on all the areas. And so I'll want to ask about the progression from, the rationale for a first area, the rationale for a second area, and then how did you establish the next, right? To share with the board feedback on each area that was and how it was shaped. And so I can do that. I also want to clarify for the school board, when Mr. Lopez was talking about languages, he described the number for the indigenous languages at 92, and the board should hear that that's a really low number, right? For actual, right, numbers of students in our school district who would speak an indigenous language. That is a low number. That is the number that was in Aries. We did a straight query. And that's when David was talking about it, I had to go through a couple of steps to get back to the language and then provide him with that information in a way that allowed him to kind of just get a lay of the land, which I'm going to guess is still expressive of where families are living with those languages, but the count wasn't accurate, but they're, it's based on areas. So whatever got dropped into areas with registration, that's what's there. And I can't second guess that today to say, no, I don't think that's the right language for this family or this address. That's not something that's possible. So taking those numbers directly out of areas, that's what we provided him with, so that he could use that in his consideration. So I wanted to clarify that for the board, because you did. I know you did. You went 92 doesn't seem like the right number. So to help you reconcile that, I wanted to provide that explanation to you. That it's just happened to be the language declaration inside of areas.
Thank you for that. That helped.
So I guess somebody asked the next steps. The next steps is that we need any modifications or new maps to the district by March 2nd for posting, 7-day posting prior to the next board meeting, which is scheduled for March 9th. And if you have any feedback, I mean, sometimes you need to doodle on it a bit. Please feel free to pass it along to staff and they'll communicate to us. If somebody wants to see a modification or has any questions, be more than happy to do that. And we can come back for the meeting next. And if there's still more discussion or questions, we can use that meeting for that and iron out anything. I'm going to try to create elementary boundaries. I think we have those files because that might provide a different look across all the maps. I do that because it's something we've done for other districts where we assisted in the county. And then if necessary, perfectly fine going to a meeting later in March or April where a scenario will be voted on. I'm hoping the next meeting though, maybe we can rule, if we're not going to vote on any particular one, we can rule out the ones we don't like. And then we can move forward with the ones we do or any modifications at that point. So
I just want to chime in here. Thank you, David. Good evening, everybody. With respect to next steps, David mentioned the March 2nd deadline for posting. So just to be clear, if it is the board's intention to vote on a map at the March 9th meeting, the maps need to be posted for 7 days prior to the board taking action on them. So to the extent that any community members are going to submit any new maps that they would like for the board to consider at that March 9th meeting, those maps must be posted no later than March 2nd in order for us to be able to consider them at the March 9th meeting. So David, what would be your outfit's internal deadline in order to be able to vet the maps and get them ready to be posted for March 2nd? Because I think that's an important date.
yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, ideally Friday, but last resort Monday, because we have to plug them into our system, turn them around, clean them up, go back and forth when something's missing. We don't want to duplicate a map that doesn't look like the submitter intended. Sure. So yeah, Friday end of business would be great. For the weekend, Sunday, let's say Sunday, that would be fine, because we are going to have to spend Monday and Tuesday, spitting out any options. And Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for mentioning that.
So Friday, February 25th is an ideal deadline if you have an additional community prepared map that you want the board to consider for possible vote at the March 9th meeting. Monday, February 28th is probably the drop dead last reasonable date for any community submitted maps. And all of that is premised on the board taking action on March 9th. If the board gives direction that they want to maybe have a third meeting on this issue and push the vote out to a later date, that relaxes those timelines a little bit. But it's all important to understand that in order for the board to be able to vote on a map, it has to be posted for at least 7 days before the board is able to take action on that map. And that's a requirement of the Elections Code section 10010. So I just want to make you aware of those legal deadlines. So thank you, David.
I have a question about our ability to view the maps. We could make the map larger on our computers, but it did not show street names and that kind of thing. And is there a Google map or an interactive map that could be available to us to look at for each of those options?
Yeah, that's a great point. We can provide a Google map for each scenario. I will tell you, and we've done this for board members before because sometimes they want to drive through the areas. We have done that, and you can zoom to a certain extent and see the other street layers. That's one option. We'd have to do it for all scenarios so that you can see that, and that would be no problem. I could probably get that to you a weekend or Monday at the latest. And then the other option, which probably won't be ready, it'll be ready prior to the board meeting, but it takes longer. We can literally do, for example, let's say you like scenario 3. We could blow up areas where the boundaries meet, super large detail for you to click on a map. There'll probably be 5 large maps, enlargements that you can have for one area. So that takes a lot of time, and we can provide that if that's the type of layering and look you want. But we could also just try the Google map first and see if that works for you, your viewing. But we can do both. It's just the enlargements for each scenario, that'd be about 20 giant maps that we have to create for each scenario for you to click on and look at. So we could do that, but it'd be right before the board meeting on the 9th if you wanted that. The link is no problem. We could have that ready soon.
I'm okay with just having the link.
The Google Maps link.
Yeah.
A question that I have is, if community members submit additional maps, are those maps then posted to our district website for the community to consider as well?
If they're posted, if they're presented to us in time to prepare them, yes, we'll work with the superintendent to get those posted on the district's website as well.
And I believe some of our community have already submitted comments, right, regarding a survey, but do those surveys remain open so that as we learn new information and get new perspective, they can continue to submit commentary regarding these maps?
Well, we recommend providing 24/7 review and comment of the maps. I know the superintendent created an excellent survey. I think he was about to speak on this specifics of the survey.
Right. So we put out the pre-map survey that just kind of allowed folks to provide input on how to shape the maps and what the building blocks might be. Our next consideration for a survey that we're working on right now is one that takes into account these 4 scenarios and requests kind of a ranking-ish, if you will, and then some feedback on, you know, the why, the consideration for why there's a preference one way or another. That was kind of our thinking for our next survey, and we were thinking that's something that comes out tomorrow after this discussion, and it's been available for the community to hear from CAUSE, and then also to hear from Cooperative Strategies and David Lopez on the statistics behind the maps, and then any of the board's comments as well, prior to getting that survey out there. But that was our expectation, was to put that out next.
And Matt, I think you just sent us, right, an email with some of the initial survey results. Does that sound correct?
Over the weekend.
Okay, yeah. And so I think I remember briefly saying something about, some commentary from the community about looking at like natural boundaries, right? I think considering things like Broadway and Main, does that sound about right? Yeah, so that's something that I did notice from the community feedback was community members believing that those natural boundaries, that those natural streets should be kept in mind as we continue moving forward with our map process.
I just want to make a comment, and you triggered me after reviewing what some of the comments were from the parent surveys, that the boundaries for the trustee areas have nothing to do with the boundary for the school where your child attends. They're not connected.
Right.
Does that, and I'm not sure that everybody understands that.
That's a great point, Linda, because as we've gone through that process many times, and I think David mentioned it, we've gone through the process of redrawing the boundaries,
Right.
and we try to do certain things, but they're certainly not nearly as hard-lined as what David presented us tonight. That's for sure.
Yeah, trustee area boundaries are significant, but it has no effect on boundaries for individual school sites. When those have to be adjusted, I mean, that has an immediate impact on the families that live in whatever areas are going to be changed. So I'll just say again, all 4 of those maps presented, I mean, each one of them would give our Hispanic community the majority voice in voting. So any one of them, it would seem to me, would be acceptable. So I don't feel a need, and I reviewed the maps several times before tonight on the website. I was looking at, the CVAP voting age and the percentage of variance, just because those seem tangible, something, that could be quantified and, makes it as equal as possible for every voice to be heard and to have an opportunity. I was impressed with all the maps, Mr. Lopez. I think you did a very nice job of making some differences, and like I said, any one of them would be acceptable.
Thank you. And we hope if any modifications or other maps have to be done, that we can similarly meet your satisfaction.
If someone's speaking, it may be muted.
If you have a question for her when she comes back up, or John, if you have as well, on the way these 2 pieces are laid out. This would be, well, didn't John have concerns on this, is what you were gonna ask though, right? So we can ask his concerns, okay. Yeah. Good evening, Ms. Garcia.
Hi. I didn't
You're
realize
back.
you were Me up again.
I think we have a couple board members that had some questions on your map, so I will turn it over to Mr. Valencia and Mr. Hollingshead.
Mr. Garcia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, excellent. One of the things that as we were looking at the maps, we noticed that I believe it was the school that was. Can we pull up the map, the cause map, so I can have some the visual?
I think David had it. Do you have it, Brian?
I have them on my phone.
There we go. Can we zoom
I
it
ran out of ink.
zoom it out a little bit so that we could see the map in its entirety? One of the questions that came up for us was the schools like Arianes, which is on the lower left-hand side, would share kind of a district with the other half, right, of Broadway. And we were just curious as to why that is, why the map was drawn in that way. Like, what's the spirit behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say it's something that I don't remember who brought it up, so apologies on that. But I think the big thing with drawing these maps is that wherever you start has implications on everything else, especially because of population. The communities that we work most closely with are the red, yellow, and I believe it's like a pinkish purple color. And so we really focus on keeping those communities as like intact as possible. And so I definitely understand why, honestly, the populations down there, I don't know as closely, but I will say that in terms of demographics, those communities aren't as different for us. I can only really reference the work that we did working with youth for the Santa Maria Joint Union districting maps. And in terms of the district that they ended up in, they all kind of ended up in a similar district. Those same areas ended up in a district together. And we heard from other parents that made sense for them in terms of like families that exist there. But again, I can't speak to it as much. I am happy to submit more information about the other districts and some of the data that, that could support why it's still cohesive and would give them, a unified voice. But I would have to work with the rest of my team who knows other parts of Santa Maria better than I do to speak on it like right now. But yeah, I do appreciate that being brought up. But I think the thing I can say now is that those communities are in a district together in other maps that we have worked with outside of Bonita.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. Something else that was brought up was in trustee area 1, we see that the voting population is about 5,000. The number is really small here, but it's about 5,500. And then, there we go. Thank you so much. Let's move that over a little bit so we could see the voting age population. So there we go. Thank you. So in trustee area 1, we see that the voting population is about 5,481. And then we see that in trustee area 5, it's 6,000. But then in some of the other areas, like area 4, it's 12,000, and the other one, it's 10,000. So there seems to be a pretty big gap, right, between those two. And so do you have any idea why that is? For example, why area 1 has such a voting age difference compared to area 2?
Yeah, I was thinking through what would be the best way to explain this, because I think the inclination is, we're all trying to make equitable maps and making sure that people, can represent who they want to elect. And so when you look at how different those numbers are, it can seem like, well, it's not fair, right? Like those two aren't getting as much of a chance, or there aren't as many people voting. And so I understand where that comes from. That I think is like the initial response. But the matter of the fact is, a lot of our communities are undocumented, right? And I think it can be hard to like understand how we have these conversations, because it can be a sensitive topic. But I don't think it's a secret that a lot of our farm working families and just people who live in these communities are undocumented, which is why we get this really large gap. I will say that, you know, some of the things that can be politicized aside, the role of, as you all have said, is to represent these families as much as possible, right? These are the kids who are attending schools, and they deserve to have a voice in how their children are educated as much as possible. Unfortunately, voting is not one of the ways that they do get to be represented, right? The only way really is coming to you directly and coming to you with their concerns or whatever it may be. But that's why we end up with such a large difference. You can tell, I mean, look at how much population there is there. It's 22,000 in the first area. And then the amount of people that can actually vote is a lot smaller. I will say that even though the numbers are incredibly different, it's like almost half, those 5,000 people would only be going up against themselves. Like they're not coming up, what am I trying to say? Because it's a trustee election, it wouldn't be like those 5,000 voting against, you know, these larger groups. It just means that there's a smaller group of people who are voting for that specific area. And so I don't think that it has as much implication in terms of how equitable it would be. Another thing in terms of, I can't speak on behalf of Cause, but Cause Action, which does do more work around, you know, encouraging people to vote and elect representatives, is that we really encourage families who are undocumented, who can't vote, to encourage their neighbors who can, right? And helping them kind of have a voice for them too. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to kind of get into it a bit more in some written comments I can send later.
Thank you so much for that context. That's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia.
Of course, thank you.
No, I just wanted to make sure because I knew you guys had concerns, so I better put it up. Somebody's seen my hands. Any other questions? I mean, do we want to come back and see if we get some more maps and we have some changes?
Yeah, definitely. Those will be submitted by the second. Any changes, and then at our next meeting,
So that
you have to decide whether we're going to go through action or further.
So what we want is if there are any concerns that the board has or additional questions that you have, or if you perceive any shifts in the maps that you have today that you'd like to see, we would want to make sure that gets to David Lopez, and I can do that if you share it with me. I can do that. Looked like, I think that we called out the 25th,
Yeah,
or the 28th. To get it ready so that his crew can put it through their program and then do their calculations to make sure that it's balanced the way it needs to be. And that gets it vetted for posting on March the 2nd. But they do have some footwork they need to do before it's really ready.
yeah, they want it by Friday, no later than Monday. I think the maps that were presented were, I don't think there should be any, I don't see any changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely would like some time to process the information. So I'm definitely not determined to make a decision on any map at this point. I definitely would love to continue to hear rationales, right? I really appreciated the rationale that was just presented to us. I would love to continue to hear that from community members as well as our consultants.
Well, that's why I was asking. I guess that's why I was asking the question on timing. So there's still a hard deadline for those things. This is why I'm asking on March 2nd. And then I thought I heard Mr. Lopez say that there was room for, or maybe it was Todd.
Yeah, Todd's having computer problems. He dropped off.
Yeah, he's not in his car again. So that if it came to it, and I think this is why you're asking it, is if it came to it, we could still discuss on the 9th rather than making it an action item.
Sure. Let me comment on that. We do have the March 9th deadline. That's when we're in the hopper to get to the Santa Barbara County Committee on District Organization. And that date, March 9th, gets us to their meeting of like March the 23rd.
Okay.
That allows us to get to the county elections office in time for them to process that through their own descriptions, which is like April 22nd, I think is the deadline on their form. So that that's ready for voting in November, right? They have their own things to do to make sure that folks get the right ballot information when they're doing their voting. I know I've been told verbally that there is some wiggle room in there if we need it, but I've only been given that information verbally, right? And so I believe it. I believe that's available, but I also know that that's gonna take some communication and coordination and cooperation from us, our advisors, the county committee on district organization, and the elections office in order to happen. I'm always a person who likes to take the written word first and follow that if it's possible. But as Todd said, as Mr. Robbins said, we do have a safety valve if we need to access it, and we think we need more time to come up with the best map. So that is available, and I would hope that we could stay the course to get to March 9th, but know that if we're still not there and we can't make a good choice or the best choice on the 9th, that we have the opportunity to ask for a little more time. It may require a special board meeting. I know it's going to require some special permissions down the line, again, from the county committee and from the elections office to make sure that happens.
Well, thank you, because it's kind of been a concentrated timeline, as you acknowledged at the very beginning, that we kind of got a late start on it. So I just wanted to make sure that when there's a firm deadline like that, I understand when the firm deadline is, whereas as opposed to,
Right.
So I heard what Mr. Robbins said, but I don't want to act on that if really the 9th is the best time to get things.
Yeah, what's on the form is that,
Okay.
the form from the elections office is April 22nd. I think, yeah, what I heard from Mr. Lopez and what I'm also hearing from the board in many ways is that each of these options is compliant. Each of these options provides representation, right? And each of them provides a voice for the subset of the communities that we might want to access. I think that the hard choice is to really decide, is there one that looks more accessible, more fair, more balanced than another, to make sure that it reflects, the board's needs and wants for representation for the community. And that's part of this process, is to inform that decision. Part of the survey we put out was to inform that decision. Is this what we're hearing from our folks, and does that line up with the maps? And for the most part, even still, it does. There's a couple places here and there where there's a fine tuning, but for the most part, I think each of these is a plausible, supportable solution. But again, it's a 10-year process, right? And so it's got to be made well at the start. I understand the board's concentration on making a wise choice here. So
It's the first time we've done it.
and you want to get off to a good start. Good
Well,
point.
I can't believe it, David, how you guys, for me, I thought the lowest priority would be incumbents, where the incumbents are. But where we are and how the districting ended up in the numbers is kind of remarkable, actually, that geographically we're not all kind of we're not in places where that made it really overtly kind of crinkled and all, there wasn't like the giant map of like a peninsula of Florida somewhere, mostly. But so thank you for all your professionalism and your work with that. It looked really good. And thank you to Rebecca.
Any other questions? And with that,
Thank you, David.
thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again soon.
Are we? Should we take a 5-minute break? Yes, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Welcome back, everybody. Excuse us for the 5-minute break. We will continue with item 8B, the 2021-22 Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP Supplemental to Annual Update, Mid-Year Report, and LCAP Concentration Grant Add-on Funds. Ms. Rebecca Herrick, good evening.
Good evening, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see my screen now? We're good. Okay. So good evening, board members, interim superintendent Mr. Beecher, cabinet members, and community members in the audience. This evening, we will be sharing information regarding the supplement to the annual mid-year report and the LCAP concentration grant add-on funds. So the mid-year report includes several sections. Section 1 and 3 include a description of how and when we have engaged or plan to engage our educational partners in planning for the use of supplemental funds included within the LCAP and within other plans. We continue to engage all of our educational partners. Some of the ways we continue to engage them include team meetings at the district and site level, LCAP meetings, DLAC meetings, school site council meeting, guiding coalitions, and through surveys. The second section includes a description of how we plan to use these funds, the concentration grant add-on funds. The next section includes a description of how the district is implementing the Federal American Rescue Plan and ESSER expenditure funds. And the final section includes a description of how we are using fiscal resources this year in a manner that is consistent with all applicable plans aligned with this year's LCAP. So as a reminder, our LCAP infographic tells our story, including our LCAP goals. We currently have 16,606 students, and each of our goals has highlighted outcomes and matrix that are based on state and local measures. Since this is the mid-year report, we review the metrics and data as related to the LCAP and our district goals. This evening, Mrs. Guak will be providing a comprehensive system overview, including student outcomes as related to our goals. So Mrs. Guak will be sharing next, and I'll let Lori share her screen. Whoops. I'm sorry, Lori, there we go.
That is perfectly okay. I was one slide behind. So good evening.
Lori, your talking
Yes.
your talking points are up, not your presentation, friend.
Oh, that is not good.
It's okay.
Texting our Lexile again, are you, Ms. Grock?
I'm trying. Let's try again. Thank you for your patience. How am I now? Yay! Thank you. All right, so good evening. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening to share the metrics and data as they relate to the LCAP mid-year report. One of the goals that we have had in assessment and accountability has been to align our data to an understanding of the whole child, as well as using it as a measure of effectiveness of the system. The strides we have made toward our aligned instructional system and a comprehensive approach to student learning are allowing us to approach this data presentation tonight in a new and innovative way. Our comprehensive programs often overlap. Services and supports funded in one plan or with one funding stream frequently complement and support other plans, other target populations, and other funding streams, which can be braided to provide comprehensive targeted support for students based on their needs. Please keep this in mind as we review the data tonight, knowing that this is not siloed data. This is not a metric reported out for the purpose of a plan or a goal, but rather this data is presented so that you have a holistic picture of where our students are at this point in time. By its very nature, this data presented is from an extremely high altitude. This is not all the data that we have in our system, but these are district level data reports. At our school sites, our leaders, coaches, and teachers have this data and so much more to inform their planning and day-to-day instruction. In school site councils, instructional leadership teams, PLCs, and culture climate teams, this data is being discussed and drilled down to group, class, and student levels. And they are discussing common formative assessment data, which is much more timely and relevant to instructional decision-making. But for our purposes tonight, we want to support you in making informed statements about the health of our system and the trend outcomes of our students. We know that you may have data and, you may have questions about this data. If you have questions about a specific set of data or a specific measure being reported tonight, please let us know so that we can prepare either a presentation where we can go deeper into that data source, or if you would like a more comprehensive data set provided in a Friday board memo. Whichever format you'd like, we are happy to provide that to you. So let's see how our system is doing with outcomes for students. We're going to begin with demographics. So who are our students? Santa Maria Bonita School District has 16,606 students enrolled. This number includes transitional kindergarten through 8th grade and includes 108 independent study students. Many of our SMBSD students are also members of special student groups, as seen on this chart. Please note that students may be identified in more than one group. For instance, a student could be an English language learner in foster care who also qualifies for the migrant education program. We call these students who fit into more than one group dual identified, and we need to consider these special groups when we calculate unduplicated student counts for some funding sources. But what we know is that all students are SMBSD students first. Another area of demographics is the presence of many multilingual students and families in our district. As you can see from this slide, this is an area that makes SMBSD very special. This chart shows our breakdown of home languages, including English, Spanish, and Mixteco, and includes a comparison to languages spoken in all California K-12 public schools. Home language typically reports the language spoken and preferred by the adults in the home. You'll notice that the concentration of Mixteco speakers in our families is at a much higher density than the state of California overall. The bottom chart offers a comparison of the percentages of students who speak a language other than English at home. This considers all multilingual students without consideration of their English language proficiency or RFEP attainment. The national data is from the 2015 census data. The California schools data is from last year, and the SMBSD data is the current data. For all of the data pieces in this presentation, we have used the most current data that we had available. So now that we have a basic understanding of the demographics of our students, let's look at the equity audit that the district engaged in earlier this year. I'm going to share some of the results that pertain to student outcomes and what we are trying to shift for our students. These equity audit results are the oldest data that we will look at tonight, but they do provide a trend analysis that tells us the experience of our students in our system over time. The purpose of an equity audit is to use mathematics and statistics to determine whether students in Santa Maria Bonita School District have a predictability of success or failure based on social and cultural factors. We use historical data. In our case, we use data from 2015 to 2019 to profile the experiences of our students, the achievement, coursework, and discipline events. So the key to that statement I just made is that this is historical data. This is not timely data. But we bring this tonight because as we look at the LCAP goals and services, we know that the mission is to create plans, including this LCAP and many others, that address inequities in the system. The findings that I'm about to share with you are not necessarily the most current, but they are computed based on our students, many of whom have left our system and entered the high school district. But what we know is that this is trend analysis. These are system-wide indicators of our needed areas of focus. So the typical SMBSD student successfully completed the classwork provided to them, leading to good grades. But this success did not reliably lead to grade level proficiency, suggesting some mismatch in what students were asked to do day to day and what is expected of their grade level peers. The typical SMBSD student does not receive a single suspension or detention in a school year, and on average, there are fewer disciplinary events now than several years ago. But what we know is that there is no typical student, and students' experiences and outcomes are shaped by their identities. So what is the typical experience of a Latinx student in SMBSD? The typical Latinx student earned an average math or ELA course grade of B or satisfactory. When they earn a B or satisfactory grade or higher, they have a 23% chance of passing the state test. The typical Latinx student is 2.8 years behind grade level in math and 2.2 years behind grade level in ELA. They typically improve by about 0.3 fewer years in math and 0.2 fewer years in ELA than similar non-Latinx classmates. What is the typical experience of a student with limited English proficiency? This student earns an average math or ELA course grade of B or satisfactory, but they only have a 22% chance of passing the state test. The limited English proficiency student is 2.9 years behind grade level in math and 2.3 years behind grade level in ELA, and they typically improve by about the same number of years in math and ELA as similar non-ELL classmates. And the typical experience of a student with an IEP in Santa Maria Bonita also earns an average math or ELA course grade of B or satisfactory. But when a student with an IEP earns a course grade of B or satisfactory on a report card, they have only a 7% chance of passing the state test. These students are 6.5 years behind grade level in math and 5.9 years behind grade level in ELA, and they typically improve by about 1.1 fewer years in math and 1.3 fewer years in ELA than similar classmates without IEPs. So even within these student groups, we must remember that there is a wide range of lived experiences for individual students. Many of the services and supports that we crafted in the LCAP and other plans were specifically crafted to address these inequities. Next, we will look at a few measures of academic achievement. So our district benchmarks provide timely, relevant data on student achievement and help us assess our progress towards our goals. Our first goal is to ensure that all students will move a minimum of a grade level each year through effective Tier 1, high-quality, grade-level, rigorous instructional practices. So we measure year over year and look for growth. You can see here that on the NWEA 1 year ago to the NWEA just a few months ago, for 1 year of instruction, this column represents the students who grew, who moved the needle, even 1 point on their RIT score. However, NWEA also calculates an achievable target growth score for 1 year of instruction based on many factors about the student, including their starting academic achievement level. This target growth is achievable for every student in the system, but you can see from this chart that less than half of our students met their individualized target growth for 1 year of instruction, We are not yet moving students a minimum of 1 grade level for each year of instruction. We are working to build a culture and climate where every day, every student seeks to learn and strives for growth. This means that every instructional minute of every school day counts. We cannot waste any of them. Our most recent data allows us to look at the growth from the last assessment to the most current assessment window, which just closed last Thursday. So from fall to winter, we represent 13 weeks of instruction, and looking at the growth patterns for those 13 weeks of instruction, we can see that our students did move, they did achieve growth, but not at 100%. And finally, we are preparing successful citizens who are college and career ready. So we look at state assessment data. The California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CASP system, and specifically the Smarter Balanced Testing, or SBAC. We can see here that in 2021, in language arts in the state of California, 45% of students who took the test met proficiency standards. In Santa Maria Bonita, we did not take the CASP test because of COVID closures. We used NWEA as our local measure, and NWEA projects a correlative value to proficiency on the state assessment. So we could predict that 28.3% of our students would have scored proficient in ELA and 12.9% in math. As we know from looking at our demographic data earlier, our multilingual students are a major part of our student population. For specific growth toward becoming proficient in English, we look at the English Language Proficiency Assessments of California, or LPAC results. It must be noted that similar to the CASP results, our LPAC results are spotty due to COVID closures. In 2020, when we went to emergency closure in March, we were just beginning the LPAC testing window, and we had to suspend all testing. In 2021, we had returned to a modified AB structure of in-person alternate day learning that also affected our ability to complete the LPAC testing for all. In addition, it eliminated the SBAC academic measures used for reclassification as English proficient. The limited testing we completed in those 2 years, coupled with no CASP testing for 2 years, have hindered our reporting of EL progress. So we can see here, when we look at LPAC year over year, we want to see students increasing their proficiency level. In this case, from 1920 to 2021, 6% of our students increased their English proficiency by at least 1 level. 37.91% maintained their level and did not increase or decrease. 10% actually regressed a level. And again, because of those COVID closures, we had 45% of our students who didn't have complete data on the 2 years of LPAC for a year over year comparison. So then we want to look in the moment at how our students are doing on English language proficiency achievement. So we look at the levels that are assigned. Emerging is the lowest level on the LPAC. Expanding is the mid-level. Bridging is the advanced level and is a requirement to get to redesignation as fluent English proficient. You can see here the number of students in each of those areas and the percentage of our ELs as a whole. And again, lots of missing data, even in the 1 year because of COVID closures. And then finally, we always look at redesignation rates, and we wanted to offer this comparison to you compared to the statewide rates, knowing that even though we're offering a year over year trend analysis, our 1920 and 2021 years are a little bit hinky because of the limited data. But you can see our reclassification rates each year compared to the state as a whole. And so far this year, we've redesignated 1% and anticipate redesignating many more in the next window. So we know that academic achievement is not the only, or many times the most important, assessment of system outcomes for students. If students are not engaged and connected to school and the adults there, then all academic achievement is hindered by that lack of connection. So of course, we look at the social emotional characteristics of our students. We seek to provide a culturally competent environment, a sense of belonging for all students, and a supportive classroom culture. To do this, we analyze our data from the Panorama surveys and the California Healthy Kids surveys. You can see here, this is our most recent survey of Panorama data of our students, noting how well students consider the perspectives of others and empathize with them. Kinder through second grade, 70%. That number falls steadily through the 3rd through 5th grade band and into the 6th through 8th grade band. We offer a national percentile comparison in the 3rd through 8th grade bands as well, so that you can see not just how our system is doing within itself, but how that might compare nationally. We also want students to feel that they are valued members of the school community. And we can see here in the 4th through 8th grade students who were surveyed, 50% of them responded favorably that they do feel that they are valued members of their school community, which correlates to a 20 to 39th percentile nationwide. And then using the California Healthy Kids survey from last year, 2021, we can see that our 5th grades reported 59% of them reported that they felt a school connectedness, and in 7th grade, that number was 61. I do want to add that we have data results from the adults in our system too, who also took the Panorama surveys, and we would be happy to bring that back to the board at another time. But tonight's presentation is targeted specifically to student outcomes, so we focused this presentation on the student survey results only. So finally tonight, our last area of focus for data is on behavior and attendance. We see both of these metrics as a direct indication of the students' engagement with the school in positive ways. We know that students who feel valued and appreciated and important in the school or class are more likely to attend regularly and less likely to have discipline incidents. So we begin with the average monthly attendance for this school year. You can see we went all the way back to August. The blue bar is students in attendance, and the orange section is the average of absences. We wanted to show you this over time because we know that we're dealing with a lot of really unique factors for attendance this year. You can see that in January, as everyone, I think, in the country experienced, we had a huge situation with attendance that has bounced back a little bit in February, and we expect it to continue. But again, we could not offer a year-over-year comparison because of the difference in accounting for attendance during distance learning. We hope to be able to provide you with year-over-year trends in the future as things continue to stabilize and we stay in person. We also know that the sub situation and the absence situation for students as well has been on your minds. And so we wanted to provide this chart, which documents the average attendance for the last 2 weeks, so up to yesterday. The red line is the number of students who were absent. The orange line is the number of students who were excused absent, and the pink line is the number of students who had unexcused absences. You can see in all 3 of these areas, we do have improving attendance rates over the last 2 weeks, and we hope that that trend continues. So keep in mind the very distinct limitations of reporting trend data for these areas of attendance and connectedness, as school closures and distance learning led to very different scenarios, including school discipline. So we look here at our suspension rates over time, keeping in mind that we were in closure for 3 months of the 1920 school year, and we were in distance learning for most of the 2021 school year. But we can see the suspension rates for the state and the suspension rates for Santa Maria Bonita School District, and that we are meeting the challenge of decreasing our suspension rates. And then we can postulate that that means we're also meeting the challenge of increasing student school connectedness. Same goes for expulsion rates for the state and for the district. So again, our purpose tonight is to support you in making informed statements about the health of our system and the trend outcome of our students. Now that you have a clear picture of the outcomes for our students, let's return to Rebecca, who will be highlighting some of the many services and supports we provide to our Santa Maria Bonita School District students.
Thank you, Lori. So I'm going to highlight some of the services or supports that are in the LCAP that impact the outcomes that were shared. Every year, we progress monitor all the actions and services in our plan. For the mid-year update, we report all of the adjustments that were made. I am sharing a few examples this evening. We make adjustments on data from local assessments, from feedback from our educational partners, from surveys and information and training we provide throughout the year. For example, in Goal 1, we have increased funding for PE supplies and band instruments. We have increased literacy support for students and access to technology. As for positions, HR is actively recruiting for various positions. For example, we have recently hired the data analysis position, and the coordinator of assessment and accountability position is currently being advertised. And we continue to ensure that our bilingual instructional assistant positions are filled. Other examples, for school safety and security, we no longer have school resource officers. We have hired through an outside agency, private security company that is providing our junior high campuses additional security guards for student safety and supervision. Thus far, we have had very positive feedback from our junior high principals and a few teachers. They have shared that not only is there an increase in feelings of safety and security, but that the security guards have started building positive relationships with our students, which in turn increases students' feelings of connectedness to adults on campus. We have also increased our school-based therapists to extended learning hours. We are currently hiring 2 more FOAs for our Mesteco families. We have hired 2 additional district community liaisons. We have made adjustments for our parent education offerings and have increased communication services. And of course, we have made adjustments concerning field trips due to the pandemic and lack of busing. So as for the additional concentration grant add-on funding that has been received to increase the number of staff who provide direct services to students on school campuses, we are currently in the very early development stages of our planning. We are continuing to provide opportunities for input concerning the use of these funds through various avenues, including our LCAP staff survey that was sent out last week, and a parent and community member LCAP survey that will be sent out in early March. These are the programs that are in our early development plan. They're again in the stages of planning that additional funds might support. So the first one is our Universal Transitional Kindergarten Program. Another one is our plan to provide further equity by increasing inclusive opportunities for students with disabilities. Further support towards our dual language immersion program, and we want to support growth due to capacity. Now, the last 2 parts of the plan, there's 2 prompts, and they include both a description of how the district is using the fiscal resources received for the year in a manner that is consistent and applicable to all plans and how the plans are aligned with the current LCAP and annual update. What is most important is the through line that we have established through all of these plans as we evaluate how our students are doing, our greatest needs, performance gaps, our goals, and our actions and services. Now, we've gone through these plans before, and I'm just going to go through quickly. In our school safe return in person plan, which will be updated again in March, we prioritized health and safety needs. We included strategies for continuous and safe in-person learning, strategies for addressing the impact of lost instructional time, and supports for students' social, emotional, and mental health needs. In our Educators Effectiveness Block Grant, we included coaching and mentoring of staff to include onboarding in our induction program, our new program. We also included more professional learning and strategies to improve inclusive practices. In our Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant and Program, we have extended instructional learning time, access to online supplemental learning programs, including outside the school day, accelerating progress to closing learning gaps, and then again, more social, emotional, and mental health supports. And then one more under our Universal Pre-Kindergarten Grant for Transitional Kinder, we have started using some of these funds towards supplemental instructional play-based materials. Again, the importance of all these plans is the through line, and that we're thinking of our students, our greatest needs, performance gaps, goals, and actions and services. So this includes our presentation. So at this time, I'm wondering if you have any questions for us. Any questions or thoughts?
Board members, as you're gathering your questions, I do want to welcome to the screen a big thank you to Rebecca Herrick and Lori Grock, but also we have Eric Thompson, Nicole Wiseman, Jennifer Loftus, and Brian Zimmerman, who are also here in case you have questions so that you can hear from them directly as well.
Is anybody?
I just had a comment. Can you include this in our Friday memo? Because I was trying to take notes so I could ask questions. I just couldn't keep up. So I just wanted to look at a little more of the information that was shared with us. It's a lot of information. That way, if I have any questions, maybe I can clarify with one of you.
I have a question regarding the social emotional component through everything. Have we been able to hire enough outreach therapists, whatever? I know they come by several different titles, to meet the needs that exist at our school sites, or is that an area also where we're struggling to find people to fill those positions?
We have struggled to find the marriage and family therapists, the school-based therapists. Outreach mentors have been a little easier to find for the school sites. However, with the marriage and family therapist, because we had trouble filling those positions, even though, the CADA has done a great job of recruiting, we determined about halfway through the year that we needed to look for remote therapists. So they have been doing extended hours of therapy for students in order to fill that gap, because in person, to find people to work in person has been a challenge. They've been able to fill that gap through the virtual aspect.
And a follow-up on that, Brian, would be, are there then difficulties in assessing and checking on kids, identifying students, as well as providing them services of the kids we know, or the kids that historically we've served over there? I mean, for me, my experience in talking to folks on campuses is that it's been difficult because of the return to the classroom and to the sites that some of the kids are not, haven't been assessed or checked on in a couple of years. And so I feel like maybe is the demand like far exceeding what we have available to us staffing wise for that as well?
Well, at this point, if students, there is a referral process. So if students are showing that need, they'll go through either a cost process, a coordination of services team process, or an SST student study team process. And they'll be referred by, a teacher, a parent, administrator. They'll go through a meeting and they'll determine the level of service that is necessary to meet the needs of the students. At this point, we've been able to fill that need. And again, we were having a difficult time with the marriage and family therapist to meet those upper tiers of the students with the highest social emotional needs. But with CADA being able to recruit folks for teletherapy, it's been able to assist for those the students with the highest needs. So with this, again, with the referral process at each school site, they've been able to meet that need.
So you feel like they've kind of been able to catch up, as it were, and make sure that we've got all the kids identified and getting them what they need? Is that what you're saying?
I think the prior year was more of a challenge with COVID and not seeing the kids, but with kids being on campus this year, it's been more evident and they're able to identify them. It's been easier this year compared to last year.
A question that I have is how do we know if what we're spending resources on or spending money on, how do we know if it's working or not? Like you all have described a variety of different, programs, strategies, right? And so how do we assess if these programs if we're getting a bang for our buck?
So I could address that each year in the LCAP and in all of our other plans, we do have to progress monitor. So we at least progress monitor 3 times a year, and that is through qualitative and quantitative data that some we shared this evening, but we're constantly looking at all of the actions and services and progress monitoring those.
And I would add to that, Mr. Valencia, that in future presentations of data, we'd like to include those trend lines. We were able to do that for a few of our pieces of data, but again, because of COVID closures and comparing apples to oranges, I didn't feel comfortable including all of the historical data. And some of our data pieces like Panorama are very new and we don't have that historical data. But as we progress through time, we'll be able to present that data with multiple checkpoints along the way so that you can see the impact of our services and supports on the bottom line of our student achievement and feelings of connectedness and attendance and behavior data.
Well, Lori, I feel like you did as good a job as you could do with the data that you have, because it's hard to detect trends when you really don't have a lot of data points and you're not able to really kind of suss out different groups and what the variables may be. I think that's the hardest part about COVID and not being on campus, is that variables are what affect data. And especially in education, a lot of those variables aren't necessarily always accounted for. So we have to look at trending and trajectory because it's not hard data. So I appreciate what you presented to us tonight. For me, the concern was to see, I've never put a lot of faith in the California Healthy Kids Survey. But looking at that in Panorama, my concern is that for both, the numbers seemed a lot lower than I would have hoped they would be as far as connectedness and some of those things. In the past, the California Healthy Kids Survey we've scored really, really high on that, I think, for the most part. So I think I share the board's concerns that we're really trying to, and this is something that's not measurable, but something that we can work on, is just really trying to continue to establish that sense of community and outreach and then touch points with each kid, just making those connections, because it's really hard for for our kids, but also for our teachers to make any kind of, to move that needle if there's not a sense of common spirit. And I say it that way because it's not like a kid comes in and says, well, my goal is to move up a grade level today, or or to get my Lexile up. But just like we're their parent, or the teacher is their parent, for the surrogate parent for the day, they want to come in and please that teacher, right? And if especially if they have that relationship, and vice versa. And I think then that starts to spill out to some of the other kids. So I hope that data changes for us. And I think when it does, it'll be reflected in some of those other, hopefully some of those other points. But I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
A follow-up question is, in our packets, it described that many of these funds need to be used for direct services. And I'm wondering if you all can elaborate on what are some examples, for other examples of direct services, and then what are some non-examples of direct services, just to help me wrap my head around what that looks like.
So I will try to answer that a little bit. Some of the supplemental services are in a lot of our plans, and they're supplemental to like the core programs. And so that's what the supplemental funding is for. Direct services to students, I think it was in the presentation. So that directly affects the students, and it could be in different ways. But we did talk about direct services. I'm not sure.
Like instructional assistance, right? We have bilingual instructional assistance. That would be a direct service. And then what would be an example, Rebecca, from LCAP or any of our team of an indirect service when we think about how we spend our money? It could be for a tool that we use, right, in support of kids, but it's not someone that has direct contact with students, but it is in support of us being able to, like, I'm thinking of Panorama itself, Mr. Valencia. That's, Panorama isn't teaching our kids, right? It's a tool that we use to help us progress monitor. For me, that would be the non-example of direct supports and supports.
Excellent. That helps answer my question. Another follow-up question that I have is, I noticed also in our packets, it talked about, all of our students, all of our 21 campuses are eligible for this funding, but is that funding distributed the same amount? So let's just say hypothetically, each school site gets $200,000, for example, or is it based on the need of that campus? Say, some of our elementary schools might have a higher number of low-income students or more foster students. So how is that money distributed among our 21 schools?
So our funding is distributed for our unduplicated count. And once we hit a certain threshold, like with our title funding, we're school-wide programs. And so all of the schools kind of are involved and have some of the funding. And then like in their school plans, their funding is allocated according to their unduplicated student count, just like our funding is for the district. That's how they receive their supplemental funds at the school site level.
So then, therefore, if there's more foster students at a particular school site, that school site is going to get more funding to help meet that need? Or is it at the same exact number to each school site?
No, it's different numbers. And Lori explained it earlier in her presentation. It is according to the unduplicated count of students. And unduplicated count means that they could be in different categories, several categories. So it has to do with the free and reduced lunch count, English learners, and foster youth students. So it's all one count for unduplicated students.
So the higher the needs at a particular school site, the higher the funding.
That's correct, for their school site allocations, correct.
Gotcha. And then in terms of, you had mentioned college field trips. I just spoke with my students today about that. I gave them the opportunity to do a quick Google search of a college campus. And, my students, the feedback they gave me was that they really appreciated that time that I gave them to look up notable alumni, cost to attend. But one thing that struck out is that the college that they were looking at today was USC. And only one or two of the students in my classroom had actually had the opportunity to attend, to go and visit that school site. And so that made me really sad, right? That our students could only virtually, right, participate in something like that through their computer screen versus in person. And so do we have the capacity to continue to help our students to go on college field trips, or are things on lockdown at college campuses where our students cannot participate in that?
I don't know if you want me to speak to that, Ms. Dutra. I could just.
I was just talking to myself saying both. But go ahead, Jen.
We really are still limited, Mr. Valencia, in taking our students out into the community. We're getting closer to that. We're very hopeful to return to some sort of normal along those lines in the near future. We have worked hard to provide experiences much like what you described providing to your students. And of course, students enjoy that, but there's nothing quite like making that visit and actually being on a campus and experiencing exactly what you're speaking to. Soon, very soon.
Jennifer, can you speak to the equity piece of it, that in the past it was if a school liked doing that, they would go, but what we're building in now for the experiences so that it's not by chance, but by design that each student gets, if just quickly for the board.
Absolutely. You've heard us talk multiple times about the teacher advisory teams that we have. One team in particular is really focused on ensuring that we do provide those equitable experiences. So what that looks like is sitting down and really defining what experience might that be for a first grader. And that experience then we would want duplicated across our system. And then carry that same thinking through to each grade level. We would not want to be doing the same experiences necessarily in first and second and third grade, but let's define what we want every first grader to have, every third grader to have, so on and so forth, so that all students are getting those great, really quality experiences that we want them to have. By design instead of, by choice or chance.
And one of them is a college visit.
Mm-hmm.
That's really great to hear, because of course none of us want to put our children in any harm's way, right, through these experiences. But if we have the capacity to make it safe, and the universities have the capacity to keep our students safe, then let's do it, right? I think that is a really critical piece of how we can use LCAP funding effectively. And I believe there's also research to support that, right? How it motivates our students to begin to see themselves, right, as college students when they actually visit a college campus. And so I definitely want us to continue to invest resources in that for our youth.
Hey, Ricardo, has the high school opened up and taking kids out and about yet?
Good question. I haven't heard of any opportunities. I know that they're already planning like grad night, right? So they're going to be taking hundreds or thousands of students to Disneyland, for example, right? So I believe if that's in the works, then we should be able to figure out some college stuff if it's safe, of course. So
you don't know?
No, so I don't believe they've done so for college visits yet, but they are doing other activities. I'll give another example. The PCPA invited my students, about the capacity is 125 students to come and participate in a PCPA play. And so that's why institutions are kind of figuring out, right, ways to do it safely, masked up and things like that. So that's why I want to make sure that if opportunities are available, that we are able to help our students take advantage of these opportunities.
We also do partner, if you don't mind me saying, with Allen Hancock, and our junior highs are in the preparation stages for having an on-site visit for all of their 8th graders. And we really work to make that a really fun day where the students are thinking about their profiles, who they are as a learner, really using their knowledge of themselves as what they might want to do, what classes they might want to take in high school, what classes they might want to take beyond high school. And they go around to different booths and gather a variety of information. So that's something that you're welcome. Any board member would be welcome to pop in at one of the junior highs. We can certainly provide the dates. They're scheduled as of last week. That might be fun and of interest to you.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I'd like those dates.
We will include those dates in the upcoming board memo for you.
Thank you.
That's good.
I'm not sure if this is for Lori or Rebecca, but the data that you did share with us, you're sharing it with us here. How is that shared out with staff so that for their feedback and then moving forward? I know for NWEA, the fact that it's not a summative situation, it hopefully can inform them a little bit, but how's that going?
It's actually going quite well. So both NWEA and Panorama data are shared at the site level with site administrators and at the classroom level with teachers who have contact with that student. So for instance, in a junior high with multiple classes, any teacher who touches that student during the day gets that student's data to know where they are and how they're feeling. We were able this year for the first time to provide a comprehensive data package to every site for their comprehensive needs analysis. So every time that we do, for instance, an NWEA window, we provide to the site not only their site data broken down by student groups, but also a comparison data point for their cluster of elementary schools or for all junior highs, for the district, and for the national. So our sites are able to look at this trend analysis and see how they're doing at this point in time compared to all of those different groups and aggregates of data. So we're really excited to start providing data on a regular basis to sites so that they can start really having those data conversations. But every teacher and administrator in the system has access to that data as soon as the window is closed.
And I spoke with, I think it was Melissa, about this in trying to give the teachers some kind of support in understanding data and interpreting data, and because data, depending on how it comes to you, can either be really dry and something you just don't look at, or it can be something also that doesn't mean anything to you. So for me, the thing is I guess the question is, how are we giving teachers some support in understanding what the data means for them and in general?
We are. So I've been working closely with Nicole through our leadership team meetings with administrators to provide training to our site administrators on how to look at reports and also how to train teachers to look at reports. We also have several of our district TOSAs working on data-based presentations. So for instance, Michelle Sullivan from Assessment and Accountability, she's our TOSA for A&A. She's gone out to sites and coached sites through the process of using the NWEA data and specifically the learning continuum, which tells you, which gets away from that dry data that you were talking about, that just a score or a RIT, and actually tells you where students are in their readiness to learn and what the things that they need more reinforcement on and the things that they are ready to progress towards. We also have our EL TOSA, our multilingual TOSA, and our multilingual program specialist working with sites to provide that professional learning to teachers about how to use that data, including LPAC data and achievement data through NWEA to support our multilingual learners on their path to redesignation as fluent English proficient. So that was a really long answer. The short answer is yes, we're building that into the system at every level and supporting leaders of sites and leaders of classrooms to generate that work that does the most for students.
I would also
I'm sorry, Jennifer. For me, the only reason I say it is because I think, to Ricardo's point, is we not only do we want to be able to look at the LCAP and the expenditures and see that they're making sense, but we want the teachers to feel like if there's something they're being asked to implement, or if there are things they're doing in the classroom that are under our budgetary distributions, that they can see a difference, and that the data that helps them understand that is something that they can use. So I guess it was kind of a little bit of a corollary, but thank you so much.
And I would
I'm
just
sorry, Jennifer, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to add to what Ms. Grock was sharing, in that several of the TOSAs have provided a variety of learning series options for teachers specific to using the different data sets that Ms. Grock was mentioning. So for example, if you want to drill down and really figure out how to use that map assessment data, right, you can sign up for a 3-part learning series that includes embedded coaching. So that there's learning, and then we come out and support it at the site. A little more learning, we come out and support you at the site. They're completely optional for teachers because we're really trying to support them where their interest and where their need is right now. And we've had really, really good turnout, really good interest in each of the offerings that we've provided.
Any other questions? Ms. Cordero? Thank you all for the presentation. And I'll acknowledge the receipt of the 2021 Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP supplement to the annual update mid-year report, and LCAP concentration grant add-on funds is presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Hey, Rebecca, this says draft. Is it mostly final? What
No,
you got?
it is the draft, and it's approved with the LCAP in June.
Oh, okay, I see it. But okay. So, can you send us this so I don't have to take paper home?
Yes, we'll send it to you in the packet on Friday, the draft again.
Okay, thank you. I was just asking for Mrs. Flores because she always asks.
Will do.
A lot of information, and I'm glad I spent a considerable amount of time really looking at the maps, the trustee area maps. And I attended the LCAP meeting a couple of weeks ago. So reviewing what was in our packets for tonight's meeting, it was helpful to have done that. And we get a lot of money. And I know one of the things that I recall specifically is because positions are not able to be filled, we have been spending money for extra time for folks who are willing to do the extra work to try to close that gap a little bit. So, you know, the challenges, you know, that our classroom teachers are facing, I mean, just looking at attendance data, and if a teacher, you know, you have kids out every day, and I can remember, you know, when flu season hit, you know, years ago, and you had even 3 kids out for 3 days in a row, it was like, oh, I need all my kids here. And so that creates, you know, extra challenges. And when we pull special assignment teachers in to cover classrooms and they can't do what they're supposed to do. That extra support, you know, for the classroom teachers is in the wind until things settle down again. So I know the impact of this pandemic is far from over. So I just want people to feel like I'm doing everything I can and look at it and take it one day at a time. Just like the field trips. I mean, field trips were an integral part of, I mean, when I was teaching and when I was an administrator, I mean, 3 or 4 field trips a year for every class. So kids were getting those experiences and, you know, the limitations on just, you know, having students in band be all together without their masks to play their instruments is challenging. So, you know, we still are dealing with constraints. So I would hope that teachers are looking at, you know, some of the other criteria that students demonstrate that they are learning and not just, you know, relying entirely on that assessment point data, but, you know, what their attitude is, how hard they work to complete their assignments, how consistent they are in the effort that they're putting forth, and some of the work that they do on a day-to-day basis to try to measure some of the progress that is being taken. That's it. Thank you.
You want to use my computer, Mrs. Flores?
Okay. I'm good. You know what, before you start, John, one more thing. I know, you know, the coronavirus or the rates are decreasing and we have fewer constraints. Any of the principals that might be out there listening or watching or teachers, just give a call, send an email, call me on the phone. I'm up to visiting classes and school sites now and would love to be included in an activity or if you're doing something that you need an extra hand with. So okay, and Mrs. Flores says the same thing. Her battery died. And, you know, we're anxious to have some interaction with students again and teachers and let everybody know that we are here to support them. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah, I have the privilege of attending an event sponsored by the NAACP in honor of Black History Month at the Santa Maria Public Library. I had the pleasure of seeing Ms. Cordero in the event as well. And one of the things that struck me about the event was somebody said something really powerful. They said, you know, we have Black History Month, you know, this month, but you know, how cool would it be if one day we didn't even have a need for a Black History Month because it would be embedded throughout American history, you know, throughout the year. And that really struck me, right? Because the more I learned about Black History Month, the more I learned that it was a struggle, even, you know, to even just get 1 week of Black history, you know, at one point in our school curriculum. And now we have a whole month dedicated to it, knowing that, of course, the expectation is that we incorporate, you know, diverse history throughout the year. But that was really something, one of the things that really stood out to me about the event. And I believe there was a story about it in our local newspaper. So if folks haven't had a chance to read that, I encourage you to read, to get a sense of, you know, all the wonderful things that took place at the event. I also want to acknowledge that March is Women's History Month. And one of the things I wanted to have the board consider is, I'm not sure if in the past we've ever done like a resolution recognizing like March as Women History Month. And because I believe the California School Board Association might have some language around that, maybe some models or some examples of things that we can use to consider. Something that shares with our staff, right? That we honor, right? All of our women staff, and in terms of our curriculum, right? Making sure that we're also including women in all the wonderful history that we're teaching. And so just something that I want to put on the board's radar to see if it's something that you all want to consider for the future, is looking at a resolution recognizing and honoring Women's History Month, which is an idea that I'm graciously borrowing from a fellow board member at the high school district, Ms. Karamitsus. She's done a wonderful job of taking moments from during board comments to acknowledge these monthly events. And so I definitely am borrowing those great ideas from her. And I also just want to share with you all some great news that, you know, the young ladies that have attended our schools, our elementary and middle schools, you know, now, you know, they're at the high school level, and our girls wrestling team from Santa Maria High School scored second place as a team for our girls wrestling team. I believe our Pioneer girls, scored first. And I believe this is out of approximately 40 or so schools. So here locally, we have, you know, outstanding young student athletes that I think definitely deserve a lot of recognition. Also, our girls soccer team are for 2 times in a row will be competing in the CIF, you know, competition. So going to their finals competition, if you will. And so it's really awesome to see that our young people are starting in our elementary school district, middle schools, and that they're moving on to us as outstanding scholar athletes. And something that a community member recently passed on to me, a fellow teacher at Santa Maria High School, he has the idea of incorporating wrestling into our either elementary and or middle schools, which I thought was a really fascinating idea. I passed along the information to our interim superintendent, who I believe is then going to connect with other staff to see if that is a viable or something of interest in our community. But he came up with a really great PowerPoint sharing, you know, rates of how few injuries there are compared to the number of people that participate, the self-esteem, right, that our young people get when they participate in sports like wrestling. He also shared some notable, you know, wrestlers, American presidents, right, that had been wrestlers. I had no idea that Abraham Lincoln wrestled at some point in his life. So that was a pretty interesting fun fact to me. But yeah, I think it's definitely an idea worth exploring, and I would love to learn more about that. So I want to thank Mr. Silva, teacher at Santa Maria High School in the math department, for bringing that to our attention. Thank you very much.
I'll reiterate that Ms. Cordero spoke from Mrs. Flores. Mr. Beecher?
I have a quick update for the board. We have been operating under the resolution that allows us to have our board meetings remote. At our last board meeting, Mr. Hollins, as you talked about the possibility of reconsidering having board meetings remote. The current resolution will expire on March the 11th, which is the day after the board meeting. And so one of the thoughts I had was to bring that resolution to the 10th and then make the choice at that meeting that if conditions between that Friday before, when we have to get all our board items finalized and to you, if conditions are such that it looks like maybe we want to extend or not, we can make that decision at the board meeting and then act on that item to either approve it or to table it. But I feel like I want to keep that available because I can't seem to predict this thing, right? Let's not try, but just to have it there so it's ready if we need it. I know that the 28th of February is when the California Department of Public Health is planning to revisit the concept of students wearing masks on campuses. Right now, I know that their focus is that students and staff, while working together on campus, must wear masks. It has to do with low vaccination rates, I think, is their target rationale. And so they're going to be re-examining that choice. Between now, I'm sure they already are, right? Examining the numbers, watching trends to make a scientifically based decision. And then put that out on the 28th. So we'll have that information to consider on the 10th. that is my plan at this point. I just wanted to share that with the board and just see the expressions on your face without asking for an action, because we can't, it's not on the agenda. Just that is my general plan of action. I've talked with several local districts through email in our area, not just in Santa Barbara County, but folks that I'm connected with. There are many that are in person already. There are several that are still remote. What that looks like in their boardroom is different in small ways. The main thing that's occurring when I sent that email out was people were still wearing masks, because at the time, the statewide mask mandate was in place and the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department's mandate was in place. And so since then, both of those things have been listed. I'm expecting that they will, my peers in other districts are considering whether or not masks are going to be necessary in their boardroom. I asked a clarifying question today of Susan Klein Rothschild, who's kind of the liaison to the school districts from the California or from the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. My specific question was, in the boardroom, as a non-school site location, but a work location, we fall under the Cal OSHA requirements, which are if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. But if you're unvaccinated in the room working with others, you must wear a mask. And that's where Cal OSHA draws the line. We still fall under those provisions. The question I asked was, if we have students in the boardroom, because I know that is a strong desire for the school board, is to have that inspiration from students where they come and share what's happening at their school site here with us, whether or not we as adults who might be unvaccinated would be required to put masks on when students are there. And she clarified to say, because it's not a school site, we wouldn't have to. But no matter what the situation, as a representative from public health, she said, we always strongly encourage masking. And that recommendation was not for vaccinated, for unvaccinated, for students, or for adults. The county public health department is still strongly recommending that people wear masks, but it's not something that's required. I sent an email out to the entire staff. It's been 2 weeks now, February 15th, that now in the work site, if students are not present, then folks who are fully vaccinated do not have to wear a mask, and if unvaccinated folks will still be required to wear a mask if they're working with others in the room. So I wanted to provide that clarification. A lot of what was described for me in that question around how board meetings were being handled, they started with some restrictions around spacing, making sure people had 6 feet of their own, but that those had all been relaxed, and that really at the time all they were requiring was that people wear masks. And so I haven't checked back in since those mandates were dropped to find out what their requirements are now. The other thing that we'd still be required to do, and I've emailed Mr. Ricky, is to figure out how we can handle the requirement to maintain access remotely for participants, right? Making sure A, that we're broadcasting, and B, that folks have other alternatives to access public comment, whether it's by phone or by video. And so we've got to figure out that piece, because we'll want to, without making it a big production in my mind, make sure that we're visible and audible, and that someone at the podium is visible and audible real time, without hiring a production staff to cut cameras and make those choices. But that's the road I'm going down at this point.
When I've broadcast, so to speak, track meets on Zoom, I've actually done this. I've had it so that essentially I had a camera on the meet and then a camera on myself, and so I can see. I think Brian would probably say it seems to me that as long as we have a camera that's a designated person for the podium and our Zoom format here, that they would simply appear as the person on that the one square would be designated for the podium. I mean, you could even, I mean, I don't know if Brian would want to change the name every time somebody stepped up, but maybe they could hold their little name placard up, you know, as they walked up. But I think that seems like it would be doable and not changing what we're doing now, just having people here. So I appreciate that. But what I would add though to the masking aspect of it is that there's this recommendation is still especially implemented with kids because they're the ones who are the lower age groups now are the ones who are have the highest incidence rates, or very high incidence rates, I should say. And then, you know, I think as far as with vaccination, I think the point is that we're not going to ask people to present their vaccination card. We would ask them to be on the honor system. So in respect for people who might choose to not come with the mask yet, not be vaccinated, just to kind of, because they can, I think it would be respectful of everybody to just keep the mask thing for the time being, especially if we were going to have kids here. But the only reason I asked before is because I want to be able to do that, have the logistics all set in place so that we can make that, like you said, Matt, if we decide on March 9th that it looks like it's a good idea, or I think isn't that the
next board meeting is March 9th, and then the next one after that would be, I think, the 23rd.
Yeah. So and you said the March 11th is when our current resolution expires. So it's just again, I mean, like you said, we could table it if we get to April or May. I mean, the biggest thing is we want people to feel comfortable and safe, and we certainly wouldn't want to be that guy that had something happen. But I really appreciate that effort and the work that you guys put into to kind of set that up.
Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
On the topic of public comment, I really appreciate when our community members can't come in person, that they have the opportunity to submit public comment. So I want to definitely recommend that we continue to allow for that option, right? Because, you know, families working, get out late, right? And so I want to make sure that we continue to keep that door open, right? For our families.
It's just a given.
So regardless, right, whether they can come in person or not.
Regardless, it's always public comments.
Excellent.
To hear from our stakeholders and concerned family members and whoever else. No, that's
Excellent. Cool, very good.
Thank you.
well. With that, we'll adjourn. Good night, everybody. Have a good rest of the week and a great weekend. Stay warm.